when I go and give speeches, I often will talk to business leaders. And I think and I think I was telling my agent Wendy this the other day, like it's the first time over the last year where you start talking to business leaders and they're really trying to solve it, right? They don't want to say, we've done this, it's good enough. Or listen, what we're going to do on MLK Day is this one thing. Like, they're concerned for America and they actually want to solve this problem. So for example, I was talking to a guy who he runs a very successful shipbuilding company. I think in Newport News. And he said, it takes 8 years before you become a master shipbuilder. And so I realized I get most of my young people from the local public schools. The population has changed dramatically, right? They've become more diverse, but his strategies hadn't really changed. And he said, around year 3, we'd lose our employees. They just, they'd go on to do something else. And if you've invested a lot of money training somebody into being a shipbuilder and they don't last till year 8, they leave at year 3, you're losing money. And it really was that made him say, why don't the people of color want to be here? Like, what's happening at year 3? And it was a dilemma. And I think what happens is business leaders, the ones who are successful, are leaders in ways that I think media doesn't necessarily do and politicians definitely don't do, right? They actually have got to solve a problem if they want to stay in business and be successful. And I think it allowed him to suddenly realize, like, oh, wow, I've got to solve this diversity issue that I honestly didn't even realize was an issue. Like, he had no clue. And so he had to create a system where he could solve this problem. Otherwise, he was going to continue to lose employees around year 3, which had a financial impact. And I guess I'm optimistic because I think a lot of businesses are like, this can't work. This is not good for anybody. This is not good for America, period. This is not well, that side of the boat has a hole, but those of us over here are going to be just fine. Like, boats don't work like that. You have a hole, you're all going under in a little bit. And I think business leaders, politicians talk a lot about leadership, but they often at the moment fail to act truly. I wish they weren't true, but they do. But business leaders, they have a company and employees they have to save. And so they have to make tough decisions all the time. And I'm much more inspired when I read about somebody's business strategy, maybe because I'm a small business owner myself, than someone who's going to talk big about, their philosophy, but when push comes to shove, doesn't have the guts to actually do what they say that they should do. And I have just found business people are the ones, people who run companies, work for companies, are helping challenge companies around tricky issues. They're really willing to do the work. And so that is really what makes me very optimistic. And I think they're willing to ask the icky questions, because some of it is that, right? Some of it is, we got to get through this. What are some of these icky questions that we have to talk about that maybe others don't want to? So all those things really make me optimistic. And I think, Jim, that goes back to our why companies are trusted, because I think people want to believe their companies have values and believe in those values. And companies who want to keep those employees realize, if we're going to talk about our values, we have to live our values. And it's become a bit of a virtuous circle, especially if you want to keep the good employees who could really go anywhere.